Beneath the surface of official history lies something darker. Stories buried, erased, denied. You've heard the names they let you remember. But what about the ones they tried to silence? What happens when truth becomes a ghost, and the past refuses to stay buried? The Winter Ghosts of Vyrivka. The snows came early in 1941. By mid-October, the forest around the Ukrainian village of Vyrivka had turned to white silence, broken only by distant artillery and the whisper of frost-bitten trees. Operation Barbarossa had swept through the region like a steel storm. Wehrmacht patrols roamed the countryside, burning farms and executing suspected partisans. The Red Army had retreated weeks earlier, leaving behind only scattered units and civilians. But in the woods, under fir branches crusted with ice, a different kind of army was forming. One without uniforms, without orders, but not without purpose. Dasha Borodin was 17 when the Germans came. Her father, a schoolteacher, was taken during the first sweep. Her older brother disappeared into the woods with a hunting rifle, never to return. Her mother died in the famine that followed. Alone and bitter, Dasha slipped away one night into the trees, clutching a bread knife and a stolen Mauser pistol dropped by a fleeing Red Army officer. She found others, 2 deserters from the 216th Rifle Division, a nurse named Katya who had lost her unit, and an old shepherd who spoke little but could set traps like no other. They called themselves Otriad WWII Viter, the White Wind Detachment. What began as survival quickly turned into resistance. At first, they cut telephone wires, derailed carts, stole boots from sleeping sentries. Then came assassinations. Sabotage. Entire rail sections blown apart using homemade explosives. They were ghosts in the trees. The Germans called them Waldschatten, forest shadows. But one name began to spread with greater dread: Der Wintergeist, the Winter Ghost. It was Dasha. She was small, fast, and invisible in the snow. Wearing a white cloak sewn from bed linens, she moved silently, striking during blizzards or moonless nights. Her signature became the red scarf she left knotted to the wrists of dead soldiers. Some thought she was a myth, created to terrify the German ranks. But military records tell another story, of a sniper who killed an SS captain from 300 meters with a captured Mosin rifle. Of an explosion that collapsed a German field command post, coordinated with astonishing precision. Of supply depots burned to ash in freezing storms when no human tracks were found. Major Wilhelm Kruger of the 10th Panzer Division was obsessed with capturing the Winter Ghost. His diaries, recovered after the war, spoke of her like one might speak of a demon or a spirit. He ordered entire villages razed after anonymous tips suggested partisan activity. In December, his men hung 6 children from a tree near Vyrivka, each with a sign reading, "Traitor's Seed." Dasha found the bodies. That night, she poisoned the division's water supply with animal carcasses and cyanide stolen from a German medic's kit. By January, the White Wind had grown to nearly 50 fighters, most armed with outdated rifles, grenades made from jam jars, and Molotov cocktails hidden in milk churns. They used wolves to distract patrol dogs, mirrors to signal across ridgelines, and even constructed dummy partisans made of straw to lure enemy snipers. Dasha led from the front. She had no military training, only fury and focus. To her comrades, she was a protector. To the Germans, she became a priority target. Then came the betrayal. One of the newer partisans, a boy named Pavel, was captured during a botched ammunition raid. Tortured for days, he eventually revealed the location of the White Wind's winter camp. The attack came at dawn on February 14, 1942. German flamethrowers set the forest alight. Mortars shattered tree trunks. Machine gun fire cut down the snow like hail. Most of the White Wind was killed in minutes. Dasha fought back with a stolen Luger, covering the escape of the few survivors. She was shot in the leg and taken alive. The Germans wanted her seen. They paraded her through Vyrivka tied to a pole, her white cloak blackened with soot. Kruger held a public execution in the village square, forcing the townspeople to watch. Her last words were spoken in a hoarse whisper. "You'll all be dead by spring." They hanged her in the center of town. Her body was left for days. But spring did come. And with it, the Red Army. By May 1942, the Soviets retook Vyrivka. The 10th Panzer had moved west to face the growing counteroffensive. Kruger was killed by an artillery strike near Kharkov. Soviet historians dismissed the White Wind as folklore, but some knew better. Veterans from the 38th Army, upon discovering the graves of the partisans, held a small, unauthorized ceremony in the forest. They built a cairn of stones over Dasha's shallow grave and planted a red scarf at the top. Decades later, in 1996, a researcher from the Moscow Military Archive uncovered a bundle of German war reports marked Classified Mythos, Eastern Front. Inside were transcripts of radio messages, sketches of forest movement patterns, and an intelligence briefing warning that the female partisan known as Wintergeist continues to exert disproportionate psychological influence on troops. In 2003, a Ukrainian filmmaker released a dramatized documentary about Dasha Borodin, piecing together local stories, survivor accounts, and recovered German documents. To this day, children in Vyrivka place red scarves on the branches of pine trees during the first snow. They say the winter ghost still walks the forest, guarding the village from invaders, waiting in the hush of falling snow. Submarine 47, The Lost Wolves of the Atlantic. In the chill of February 1943, beneath the churning waves of the North Atlantic, the Kriegsmarine officially declared U-47A lost. It had departed from Lorient with 44 crew aboard under the command of Captain Lieutenant Erich Brandt, a respected but unorthodox officer who had once described the Atlantic not as a battlefield, but as a theater of whispers. The boat's mission was to intercept and destroy Allied merchant vessels as part of the larger Wolfpack operations that haunted the sea lanes between Halifax and Liverpool. But U-47A vanished. No mayday, no wreckage, no survivors. For weeks, German command assumed it had been sunk by depth charges or lost to mechanical failure. Then the attacks began. On March 11th, convoy HX-229 reported the destruction of 2 cargo ships. The pattern of torpedo strikes matched Kriegsmarine tactics, but no other U-boats were reported in the area. A week later, the British destroyer HMS Penmarch found the burning wreck of the freighter SS Claymount. Its crew claimed they'd been hit by a torpedo that came from nowhere. The Royal Navy began to suspect a rogue submarine, one that was not responding to any known command. Intercepted Enigma transmissions from the period show brief, garbled messages believed to have originated from U-47A. They were cryptic, sometimes poetic. "We are the dark below. Wolves must hunt." Naval intelligence dismissed them as hoaxes or mis-routed code. But in truth, U-47A had never been sunk. After a storm forced the boat deep and disabled its radio antenna, Brandt decided they were cut off from command, possibly abandoned. He assumed Berlin had fallen. The war, he believed, had become one of survival. For over 180 days, U-47A operated as a ghost boat, unaffiliated with any Wolfpack, surfacing at night, stalking the waves like a lone predator. Brandt no longer followed orders, he wrote his own. His logbooks, discovered decades later, were recovered from a salt-corroded steel locker inside the wreck. They revealed a man who saw himself not as a soldier, but as a keeper of vengeance. "We are all dead," he wrote. "The Reich is dead. But vengeance has no need for oxygen." The crew began to fracture. Some, loyal to Brandt's vision of eternal warfare, took to calling themselves the Wolves Below. Others questioned his sanity, especially when he began holding funerals for the Reich, involving ceremonial toasts in pitch blackness beneath 200 meters. One engineer, Seaman Otto Hartig, attempted to mutiny. Brandt personally executed him with a flare gun. No one spoke of disobedience again. In the spring of 1943, U-47A launched an audacious attack on a Canadian corvette, HMCS Shearwater. The strike was surgical, one torpedo amidships. Survivors were picked up by another vessel, and they swore they had seen a black submarine surface after the explosion, flying no flag. One sailor described hearing Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries echoing faintly across the water. Meanwhile, British intelligence grew increasingly disturbed. Bletchley Park cryptanalysts noticed irregular signal patterns. Someone was still transmitting in Kriegsmarine cipher, using outdated codes. MI6 launched Operation Drift, an effort to locate and sink the rogue U-boat. They never found it. But fear among Allied naval commanders grew. Merchant captains whispered of a cursed sub, helmed by men who should have been long dead. The Atlantic convoys rerouted south, away from the corridor of the Wolf. Then, in late August 1943, the attacks stopped. For 50 years, nothing more was heard of U-47A. Until 1997. A British research vessel, Orion's Wake, mapping the seabed near the mid-Atlantic ridge for a transatlantic cable, detected unusual magnetic interference. Their remotely operated vehicle revealed the mangled remains of a Type 9 submarine, embedded in the sediment like a buried serpent. The hull markings were corroded but visible. U-47A. The vessel was sealed shut. No signs of external damage. The torpedo tubes were empty. The periscope was still extended. Most unsettling of all hatches had been locked from the inside. Divers discovered the crew's skeletons still at their stations, many clutching rusted tools or notebooks. No evidence of violence or gas leaks. In Brandt's quarters, his final log entry was inscribed on the wall in chalk. "The hunt is over. Let the sea keep its dead." The story exploded in naval circles. The German government denied the mission's existence, insisting U-47A was a clerical error or misnumbered. But the recovered Enigma machine matched naval registry. British historians called it *the Lazarus boat. Conspiracy theorists claimed it was a Nazi doomsday vessel. Others believed it had been cursed by the souls of sailors it had sent to the bottom. Today, U-47A rests in a classified location under the supervision of both NATO and German naval historians. Its logbooks are preserved in a temperature-controlled archive, but only select excerpts have been made public. One reads, "We are the storm under silence. We do not wait for flags. We wait for prey." Veterans of the convoys still talk about her in hushed tones. They say some nights, when the fog is heavy and the sea goes still, the sonar pings return something moving below. No identification, no response. Just a long, narrow shadow, drifting slowly past. They call it the Last Wolf. Operation Ember. The burning of Marseille. The city of Marseille had always lived with fire. From Roman times to the Resistance, its history was marked by destruction and rebirth. But in 1944, as the Allies pushed up from North Africa through Italy and into the soft underbelly of Nazi-occupied France, Marseille became more than a city, it became a fuse. At the heart of it was a mission known only to a handful of operatives and whispered in post-war circles as Operation Ember. The plan was simple in theory: disrupt the flow of chemical and munition supplies being funneled from Italy through Marseille's vast port to the Western Front. But Marseille was not just any city. By 1943, it was a fortress under Nazi control, with Gestapo headquarters installed in the Palais de Justice, and a heavy German garrison fortified along the coast. The French resistance had been decimated by betrayals, arrests, and mass executions. The Allies knew that an aerial assault would be too destructive and too obvious. What they needed was sabotage. Surgical, undetectable, final. The Office of Strategic Services, OSS, and the British Special Operations Executive, SOE, launched the joint initiative under the cover of a humanitarian medical deployment. Enter Margot Leblanc, an OSS-trained nurse fluent in French and raised in Louisiana, and Luc Morel, a Marseille-born longshoreman turned courier for the fragmented resistance. Their first meeting took place in a basement beneath a bombed-out hospital near Rue Paradis. Luc didn't trust her. She smiled too easily, spoke too cleanly. But Margot had memorized every street, sewer path, and dock manifest from weeks of Allied intelligence briefings. She even knew the German patrol rotation better than he did. The plan called for the destruction of Warehouse 6, a massive shipping hub near the Quai de la Joliette where the Germans stored liquid nitrogen, TNT, and mustard gas canisters, all bound for use in the defense of Normandy against the anticipated Allied invasion. But Warehouse 6 was impenetrable, guarded day and night, mined, and surrounded by floodlights. So, they turned to the forgotten layers of the city, the catacombs. The catacombs beneath Marseille are older than most empires. During the Revolution, they had been used to smuggle weapons and hide royalists. In 1944, they would become the arteries of resistance once more. Margot and Luc assembled a team of 12, including an ex-architect named Jules who had once mapped the sewage systems for the city council, and Mireille, a 14-year-old pickpocket who could slip through vents and open locks with bent hairpins. They worked in darkness for 6 weeks. Each night, Margot and Luc communicated through coded letters written as love poems, which were passed through a chain of resistance contacts posing as street musicians and café servers. In one, Margot wrote, "Asterisk, my heart is a fuse, and your name the match. Burn me gladly. Asterisk, the Nazis never caught on." The explosives were assembled from stolen German grenades and homemade accelerants, everything from industrial soap to perfume alcohol. Their final weapon was a concoction called Hell's Ink, a thick black oil designed to spread fire to anything it touched. On the night of June 4, 1944, just 2 days before D-Day, the team emerged from the catacombs beneath the docks and planted 37 explosive charges throughout Warehouse 6. Each was timed to ignite in sequence. But something went wrong. At 2:06 a.m., a patrol stumbled upon Luc's lookout post. A firefight broke out. Luc was shot twice but managed to detonate the emergency trigger before being captured. The first explosion was small. The second shattered glass across 4 arrondissements. The third engulfed the entire southern port in a tower of flame that reached 60 meters into the night sky. Chemical canisters detonated in brilliant green and orange fireballs. Shockwaves were felt as far as Aix-en-Provence. The Germans assumed it was an Allied bombing run. The truth was far more intimate. In the chaos, Margot managed to escape through the sewer tunnels, but Luc was never seen again. It's believed he died from his wounds before the Gestapo could interrogate him. Some say he drowned. Others claim he deliberately collapsed the tunnel behind him to buy time for Margot. His body was never found. The aftermath of the explosion paralyzed German operations in southern France. Supply lines were cut. Dozens of convoys were redirected, delayed, or cancelled. Crucially, nerve agents stored in Warehouse 6 were destroyed, ensuring they would not be deployed during the coming Allied invasion. A secret OSS report later referred to the operation as an act of surgical chaos with disproportionate effect. But the cost was high. In retaliation, the Nazis rounded up 142 civilians from the surrounding neighborhoods. They were executed in Place Castellane. Some were hung from lampposts with signs reading asterisk, "For every ember, a flame." Asterisk Margot, devastated, requested immediate extraction. Instead, the OSS ordered her to stay. She did, until the liberation of Marseille in August 1944. Post-war accounts varied wildly. Some claimed Margot was a myth, like so many women in resistance lore. Others said she became a schoolteacher in Lyon. Declassified OSS files from the 1970s confirmed her role, but redacted her final location. A faded photograph, dated 1956, shows a woman resembling Margot laying a single red rose near the old foundations of Warehouse 6. Luc's memory endured in street art, his name tagged in fading paint under the bridges of the old port, sometimes just the initials LM beside a flickering flame symbol. In 1984, a plaque was placed near the quay, bearing the inscription, asterisk, "To those who burned for freedom and lit the night for others." Asterisk. And so Marseille remembers, not just in stone and ceremony, but in smoke. Every year on June 4th, as dusk settles over the city, flares are lit along the seawall, casting red light across the dark waters. The people don't sing. They don't cheer. They watch the flames rise in silence, honoring the ember that nearly became an inferno. Project Verdant: The Secret Gardens of Hiroshima. The bomb dropped at 8:15 a.m. on August 6, 1945. In less than a second, the city of Hiroshima vanished into a furnace of wind and ash. Tens of thousands died instantly. Tens of thousands more followed in agony. But deep within the shattered skeleton of the city, something improbable began to stir. Not in rebellion, nor in revenge, but in quiet defiance of death itself. In the months after the atomic bombing, among the irradiated ruins and scorched stone, a collective of survivors began a strange, almost surreal project. They called it Midori no Yubiwa, the Verdant Circle. Most of them were young. Many were orphaned. All had been changed by the blast in ways they could not yet understand. At the center of it all was Dr. Ayako Mori, a 32-year-old botanist and former lecturer at Hiroshima Women's College. She had been in the basement of the college library when the bomb struck, buried beneath timbers and books. When she emerged, the sky was red and the earth had no sound. In those first days, there was only shock and smoke. But Ayako took notes. She scribbled in the margins of burned textbooks, recorded temperatures on broken glass thermometers, mapped radiation burns on tree bark. She was not alone. Her old colleague, Professor Kaoru Ichikawa, had survived inside a school cellar. Together, they began what they would later call Project Verdant, a scientific and spiritual effort to find, protect, and encourage any living thing still daring to grow in the ashes of the world's first atomic attack. At first, it seemed impossible. The ground was black and barren. Rain poisoned. Insects silent. Yet within 2 weeks, shoots of Yamazakura, the wild cherry tree, began to sprout along the edges of the riverbank. Against all known science, some ginkgo trees, their leaves charred to husks, had survived. Ayako began transplanting seeds by hand. She used cracked ceramic bowls as pots. The soil she mixed with ashes, crushed charcoal, and river mud. For water, she filtered the rain through layers of fabric and prayer. Others joined her. Survivors brought bones of dead family members and mixed them with soil, believing it would nourish the roots. They planted in secret, on rooftops, in school ruins, behind broken shrines. One boy, 6-year-old Kenji, dug a hole in the floor of a collapsed trolley car and grew a single sunflower from a pocket of seeds he had been saving to eat. He called it Okasan, Mother. The American occupation forces labeled the growth anomalies as statistical outliers, or low-yield contamination zones. They dismissed survivor claims of regeneration as trauma-induced delusions. But the gardens grew. By the spring of 1946, Project Verdant had mapped over 200 green zones across the blast radius. Ayako kept meticulous records, each sprout catalogued, photographed, and compared with pre-bombing flora charts. Her notebooks became both scientific data and sacred text, describing not just plants but the people who planted them. One entry reads, Sumiko, age 12, lost family in fire, planted 3 radishes, smiles when they bloom, but does not eat them. As the circle grew, they adopted rules. Never speak of death in the garden. Never name a plant after a weapon. Always plant with your bare hands. These rules weren't written. They were passed quietly, like blessings. The act of planting became both therapy and rebellion. Rumors spread among the occupation troops. Some officers swore they saw green vines curling around broken rebar, forming shapes like kanji prayers. Others joked that the ghosts are growing gardens now. One American translator, Lieutenant James Larkin, visited a rooftop garden near Tsurumi Bridge and was so moved by what he saw that he smuggled photographs back to the United States. These images, of children watering vegetables with tin cans, of moss growing on scorched walls, were suppressed by military censors but circulated in underground peace circles in Berkeley and New York. Not all reacted with awe. In July 1946, under pressure from intelligence officers suspicious of unauthorized gatherings, American MPs raided one of the largest hidden gardens near the ruins of Hiroshima Castle. The plants were burned. 3 boys were arrested. Ayako herself was detained and interrogated for 3 days. But she never spoke a word. She returned to her rooftop garden to find it trampled. She replanted the next day. By 1948, the city began formal reconstruction. The circle disbanded, absorbed into the noise of rebuilding. Some left to seek relatives. Others died from radiation illnesses. Ayako remained. She lived in a small hut made from salvaged wood and tended a garden of over 300 varieties, many grown from seeds smuggled in by foreign aid workers. Her final notebook, dated 1951, contains a single sentence written over and over. Asterisk, what blooms after fire proves the fire cannot last. Asterisk. She died that winter. No one knows the cause. Her body was found beneath the snow, hands still clutching a frostbitten sprig of plum blossom. She was buried in her garden. Over time, the site was forgotten, paved over during the 1960s housing expansion. But not all was lost. In 1995, a local journalist researching the 50th anniversary of the bombing stumbled upon Ayako's surviving notebooks in a neglected university archive. Their pages, brittle with age, revealed the full scope of Project Verdant. A small memorial was erected on the rooftop of the now modernized Women's College, a ginkgo tree grown from one of Ayako's original seeds. Beneath it, a plaque reads, asterisk, she planted in ashes. We walk in green. Asterisk. Today, descendants of the Verdant Circle continue to meet in secret. Not out of fear but tradition. They share seeds, trade stories, plant where the world forgets. One sapling at a time. Some say that on certain nights, when the rain falls soft and warm, the ginkgo leaves shimmer in a faint glow, not radioactive, but something older. Something alive. Like memory. The Black Battalion shadows over Normandy. On the morning of June 8, 1944, 2 days after the D-Day landings, the Normandy sky was still thick with smoke. Sherman tanks rolled over shattered hedgerows. Paratroopers dropped silently behind enemy lines. And somewhere between the beaches of Omaha and the town of Cannes, an American unit fought and bled alone, forgotten not by history, but by choice. They were the 614th Tank Destroyer Battalion, an all-black unit assigned to a decoy post and written out of the official narratives that followed. But for 36 hours, they held the line against German armor in a battle that never made the maps. The 614th had trained at Camp Hood, Texas, where they were treated as second-class soldiers, segregated, under-resourced, and dismissed by white officers as auxiliary support. Officially, their mission on D-Day was non-combat, guarding a supply depot set up near the temporary landing fields at Sainte-Marie-du-Mont. But as chaos unfolded inland, orders shifted, and communications broke down. A clerical error, or perhaps quiet prejudice, sent the 614th farther south than intended, closer to German reinforcements than anyone realized. Captain William "Will" Tanner, a former schoolteacher from Georgia and the battalion's commanding officer, immediately sensed the danger. With limited maps, a single radio, and aging M10 tank destroyers, Tanner's company arrived at Hill 40, a low ridge near the road to Cannes. To the north, Allied forces were advancing. To the south, German panzer units were regrouping after initial losses at Gold Beach. The 614th, equipped for defense, suddenly found itself in the path of a counterattack. No backup, no recognition, no choice. What followed was one of the most lopsided defensive battles of the invasion, and one of its most heroic. German tanks, supported by infantry from the 12th SS Panzer Division, descended on Hill 40 at dawn. The first wave was met with furious fire from the M10s, their open turrets exposing gunners to sniper rounds and shrapnel. But the 614th had trained in adversity. They had fought racism in their own barracks. They knew how to survive when no one came. Private Eugene Ray, a former truck mechanic from Chicago, disabled a Panzer IV with a single well-placed shell, then leapt from his vehicle to drag a wounded loader back under cover. He would later die from mortar wounds. Corporal Joseph Smokes Miles manned a .50 caliber machine gun for nearly 20 minutes without relief, covering the retreat of a nearby recon squad. By mid-afternoon, half the battalion's tanks were smoking wrecks. Ammunition ran low. Food was gone. Tanner sent runners north. None returned. Still, they held. They used the wreckage of their own tanks as cover. They fired captured German weapons. One squad tunneled beneath a collapsed barn and emerged behind a panzer unit, destroying it with grenades. Tanner himself manned a damaged anti-tank gun with a broken leg, shouting orders over the din. When German loudspeakers demanded their surrender, they answered with tracer fire. At dusk on June 9th, the 29th Infantry Division finally broke through from the north and linked up with Hill 40. They found fewer than 30 men still standing, most wounded, all exhausted. Captain Tanner, barely conscious, handed over his final report scrawled on a blood-stained ration box. It read, *, held position. No retreat. Mission fulfilled. *, but recognition did not come. The official reports misidentified Hill 40 as a minor skirmish. No mention of the 614th. No citations. No medals. The Army's segregationist policies ensured that black heroism remained invisible. The battalion was reassigned to supply convoys in Brittany and was never sent into major combat again. When they returned home, they were met not with parades, but with silence. Tanner was demoted for insubordination after questioning the erasure. He died in 1952, buried in an unmarked grave outside Macon, Georgia. For decades, Hill 40 was forgotten. A farmer plowed the battlefield under. No monument. No plaque. Until 1999. A French historian named Claire Delacroix, researching local resistance actions, uncovered fragments of radiologs and battlefield reports that referenced a Negro tank unit holding a strategic ridge. Intrigued, she tracked down survivors. Just 4 remained. Among them was Staff Sergeant Harold Griggs, who had not spoken of the battle in over 50 years. With tears in his eyes, he described the sounds, the smells, the way the sky turned black even at noon. Claire compiled her findings into a small book, Shadows over Normandy, The Battle They Erased. It sparked outrage and recognition. American veterans rallied. Historians lobbied. In 2002, the U.S. Department of Defense formally acknowledged the 614th's actions at Hill 40. Posthumous Silver Stars were awarded. Captain Tanner received the Distinguished Service Cross, presented to his surviving daughter in a quiet ceremony at Arlington. That same year, a stone marker was erected on the ridge. It reads, * to the 614th Tank Destroyer Battalion, who stood alone when the world looked away. *. Today, Hill 40 is still quiet. Sheep graze the slopes. Tourists visit Omaha and Utah but often miss the turnoff. Those who find it sometimes leave small tokens, dog tags, unit patches, faded flags. On one rusted fence post, someone etched with a pocket knife, *, they fought anyway. *, because they did. Even when the orders were wrong. Even when their country refused to see them. Even when history tried to forget. The names may not be etched in stone. The files may be redacted. But memory has teeth, and in the shadows of history, it still bites. You opened the box. Now ask yourself, was it better left shut?